Buy my novel, Escape from the Village, from major booksellers online. Go to escapevillage.com. Subscribe to my Substack. Go to fountainheadforum.substack.com. Thank you. Welcome to the party, pal. This is Fountainhead Forum 179. I'm talking to Bowtied Mara. This is his second visit to the forum, and he's definitely a person you want to follow if you want to know what's going on with Javier Milei in Chile, or in Argentina. I'm sorry. No. Anyway, so yeah, lots of interesting things since the last time we talked. So how are you, Bowtied?
Yeah, no, doing well. It's been an interesting couple of weeks for sure.
Well, let's just go over some of the things that we've seen happen yesterday. Recently, there's this omnibus bill, and apparently it's going to give Milei a lot more power to cut agencies, and that passed the House, but it hasn't passed the Senate yet. Is that correct?
Yeah,
or
that's
Chamber
correct.
of Deputies, I should say. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a very interesting development. What would you say has been? Let's just go back. Since the last time we talked. Let's go back to the beginning of the year. What has Milei done really well, in your opinion, in that time?
Well, I think one of the main things that he's been able to do is to bolster up more international reserves. So he basically went from minus $13 billion to now just into green. I think we're hovering around 500 million to $1 billion in the plus of liquid reserves, central bank reserves. That's one of the things that he's done really well. The caveat is that it did come with issuing of bonds in pesos. So that might be an issue further down the road, depending on how they unwind those. But at the same time, they're bringing down interest rates all the time. So the hyperinflationary dynamics that the LELIQs local peso bonds had are completely gone. So I think that monetary and fiscally that they're doing a great job and trying to unwind the hyperinflationary bomb that they got handed as best as they can. And then, further, the chainsaw is doing its work, so to say. There's a lot of government overhead that is being killed. This new omnibus bill, if it also gets passed in the Senate, and it looks like it will, then it will basically become law, and he will have a lot more power also to disband other government agencies that are more permanent. So far it's looking really good. The downside is that socially, it is really a tough pill to swallow for most people because in dollar terms, everything has become twice as expensive in this period. And in peso terms, even more. So, if you're earning pesos, it's really, really tough to get by. And salaries and income hasn't really picked up yet. So I expect that to happen starting from Q3 this year. But so far, people seem to understand that this is needed, and his support is only growing. So that is really positive. I didn't see that coming. I thought they would have less patience and basically start, bitching about losing income and purchasing power. But so far, people seem to understand that this is happening, except for, of course, the opposition who uses the loss of purchasing power as, you see Milei is trying to make us all poorer, basically.
Well, how much purchasing power really has been lost since he took over? There's been, obviously you can't put the brakes on inflation immediately, but it seems like we've, at least got the car stopped now, right?
Yeah. Inflation we're almost to the point of single digits month over month, starting from 25%. So that is really positive. I think later down the road this year, we'll probably get to deflation at some point. We'll probably hover around, single digits for a while before we get there. And there might even be a little bit of a spike up after Q2 of this year, just because a lot of price adjustments happen around that time. But yeah, so far it's, compared to the previous admin, it's just amazing what they've done so far to wind that down. And it's kind of annoying where you see international outlets, taking the year-over-year inflation of almost 300% and sort of pinning that on Milei.
Yeah, inflation is one of those things that people, see every day because. And I think that people probably realize that, when your car is going at 200 miles an hour and you hit the brakes, it's not going to stop immediately. You've got to, it's going to take some time before it gets down to zero. So maybe they understand that. Maybe they don't. You just posted this ridiculous video of some guy in a Milei mask taking a chainsaw to people in the streets. I mean, just how have the it's creative at least, it's not, and hopefully it's not disrupting anything, but how do we how are there a lot of protests going on, or is it pretty much been quiet, or are they blocking traffic, or is it
no traffic is not really blocked, but there have been a lot of protests. But the nice thing is that the new protest rules, basically you can't block any streets or you'll get the water cannon, are really working. So they're not blocking any traffic. They're just on the sidewalks, and that's fine. And there have been some bigger protests, but nothing where you can really see like, oh yeah, the whole city is protesting or whatever. It's usually the same usual suspects.
Yeah, and also you've got a lot of public squares and stuff like that, big grass fields like the one in front of the Casa Rosada. You can stand in front of there and protest. I mean, there's not really much excuse for doing these street blocking protests.
Exactly, other than just to be annoying.
Something else you posted recently, I'm trying to figure out. You posted this: Latin Americanization of the U.S. is almost complete. This is gold. What's this about?
Well, so basically, I think around 25% of the U.S. already is, from Hispanic descent, or at least, speak Spanish, etc. I think that trend is going to continue. So I was just like kind of making a joke about, a U.S. Army official just walking down the street, and guy speaks to him in Spanish and answers in Spanish, etc., which is something that I really noticed in Miami too, where Miami's, I always call that like the capital of Latin America, where everybody just speaks Spanish, and in some businesses people don't even speak English. So I was just, the first time I got there, I was just really surprised with that. But I think that trend will probably continue, especially, more in the southern states, but also in New York, by the way. I also noticed it there.
Yeah, and while in, say, Texas, we mostly get Mexicans, I think Miami, you get everybody.
Yeah.
You probably don't get the Mexicans, but you get just about everybody else. It's a
there weren't that many Mexicans in Miami, or at least I didn't really notice. But yeah, it's more of the Southern American and the Caribbean Spanish speakers that go to Florida.
I also think Miami's actually become the Spanish-speaking version of Hollywood too. As far as I know, there's a lot of movies and TV coming out of there.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those places to go. And of course, if you got all those people together, that's a good move. Yeah. What other significant improvements have we seen since in the last beginning of the year? We'll say it's
Well, let's see what other improvements. Well, of course, we had the deregulation of the rental market. That has been hugely positive in terms of more supply for long-term rentals, and that really picked up. And in terms of taxes, it's kind of a touchy subject, just because Massa, basically the Minister of Economy before Milei got elected and was also the presidential candidate, he took off income taxes for basically 90% plus of the population, in the hope to get elected. despite doing that, he didn't. But that was completely unsustainable. And the thing is that Milei, of course, did vote in favor of that as a deputy for that proposal, because he's in favor of less taxes. But at the same time, now he has to bring them back in order to have some kind of fiscal balance. So a lot of people are annoyed with that because they don't want to pay taxes, of course. But seeing the fiscal plan that they presented to Congress, it's actually very reasonable, and the taxes are relatively lower than what they were before when Massa hadn't taken them off yet. So yeah, I think it's just a necessary step for now, at least to have some kind of taxation, just because otherwise Argentina can't pay the bills. So yeah, that's one of the things that is filed in tandem with the omnibus law, and they're probably going to push that through this week as well.
Yeah, that's a new political game I've not seen before, where you're on your way out and you make these absolutely ridiculous tax cuts, and then you can say, "Hey, I cut taxes," and then the next guy comes in, and then you can say, "Well, he raised taxes," And
yeah,
I never imagined they'd play something that dirty. It's
it's really impressive, and of course. Now, like, the opposition is saying, like, yeah, but Milei voted for taking them off, and he said that he would actually cut off his arms before reinstating them, etc. And now he's reinstating them, so he's lying. And it's sort of like, come on, man. This was like completely. Of course, he was going to vote in favor, but it was just ridiculous to begin with. Yeah.
I never imagined there's been so many more difficulties than I ever expected, since it started. And it's really been interesting. Yeah. One thing is that we never talked about on this show, but, I have to admit I've fanboyed for Victoria Villarreal enough, but now we got this new lady. Is that Maria Amelia Orozco? She certainly gave a little speech couple days ago that was very interesting. What can you tell us about her?
So I don't really know her that well, but I think last time she also gave a really good speech. She's from Salta, and she's very young and had a great speech, and really sort of voiced what everybody feels in terms of the younger generation. It's like, you guys are all these dinosaurs that have been here forever, and you can't just pretend that now you are the guys that are going to tell us how to do things, while you've been basically, draining the country of resources and just taking the economy down the drain for decades, and many of these deputies were already in the political game before she was even born. And that's the way a lot of young people feel, and that's why Milei is so popular with the younger generations.
Yeah, Salta is a province and the capital of that province, and it's in the north. It's in the northwest corner. It part of it borders Chile and part of it borders Bolivia. It's got a funny shape too, but that's probably also one of the higher altitude parts of the country. Yeah, so that's a very I couldn't find an English. I only found a Spanish Wikipedia about her, and I didn't really even find a birthday for her. But this is definitely.
I think she's 32 or to 35-ish.
So she's got a future, and we've this is the thing, we've got to look ahead. Who's going to be after Milei, and maybe she could be one who could be after Milei.
Yeah, I think so. And there's a couple of people like that in his group that are have potential, and now you can see that they're basically building up all the support and political support, and they have to structure their whole political power system, because basically his party was non-existent 2 years back. So they're just constructing all this. And this is also one of the reasons why everybody said, yeah, well, he's not going to be able to govern because he doesn't have any infrastructure, et cetera. So it's really interesting to see how they're building this up from, nothing.
Yeah, she was born in 1988, so that's so that's why I found. So yes,
okay,
December, so she'll be 36 in she still looks like she could easily. Yeah. So anyway, that's a good start. Yeah. So did Milei do well in Salta or?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. He's overall he's done a lot better in the interior, except for a few provinces that are 70% plus of public employment. But overall, he's way more popular in the interior versus the capital and the periphery right outside of the capital, where most of the voter base is in terms of numbers. So especially the province of Buenos Aires, so not the city, but the province.
Yes.
That is like a big issue where it's like a very strong Peronist stronghold.
Yeah.
That's probably not going to change anytime soon. They also elected the Peronist governor Kicillof, who has been a disaster, and they reelected him. So basically, that's why always the province of Buenos Aires is the province that usually turns an election.
Well, it's also by far the most
really didn't play that
province.
Yeah.
I mean,
and it's a shame that didn't reach a consensus before the elections, the Juntos por el Cambio and Milei, because if they would have joined forces, Kicillof wouldn't have gotten elected, because 62% voted against him, but they were basically divided between the Milei's candidate and the Juntos por el Cambio candidate. So if they would have joined forces, then Kicillof wouldn't have been governor right now.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Yes, that's Buenos Aires, because you got so many people either dependent or who work for the government or dependent on people who work for the government. So yeah, that's going to be interesting to change. I don't know if that'll. Unfortunately, it's that way with a lot of cities in Latin America. One thing that came up a while ago was this new bill, some cryptocurrency regulations, or there was regulations on the exchanges. What can you tell us about that?
That is a regulation that was already going to be implemented during the previous government, and Milei just sort of went along with that and took it over and decided to implement that because there was an audit for anti-money laundering, etc. Let me just check the name of that. I also wrote an article about that whole ordeal. Which, it's basically to be expected if you want to receive more, capital. The Financial Action Task Force, the FATF, paid a visit to Argentina, basically to see, how they're handling money laundering, KYC, all that kind of stuff. And of course, since half of the economy is basically in, the shadows, it's still like a huge issue in Argentina. So one of the things that the IMF also pressed on is, being harder on crypto, et cetera. So basically, crypto was not regulated at all in Argentina, and anybody could just spin up an exchange. And what this does is, just the way it's structured in most countries where crypto exchanges now fall under the local SEC, the CNB is what it's called. So, it's nothing crazy, but of course, on crypto Twitter, everybody went nuts about it, and oh yeah, this is like anti-freedom, etc. But if you want to be open to foreign capital, unfortunately, these kind of things are just a requirement to make it easier for foreign investors to invest in your country, because these kind of organizations give you certain points and say like, okay, this is a shady country, yes or no, and basically, Argentina wants to try to get off the shady country list. One of the things in that whole, regulation spinoff is that lawyers should, alert the authorities if they think there's something with the source of funds, et cetera. And, as I also said in my article, it's like, in practice, nothing is going to change. Basically, you already had to do KYC for local crypto exchanges. That will still be the case. And, lawyers, if they think there's an issue with the funds, they'll probably not notify the the authorities anyways, unless it's, something very illicit. But, the source of funds is something that most people don't really care about in Argentina.
Well, unfortunately, monetary policy has become a worldwide thing. And while I'd rather, as you pointed out, it's something that if you want to be, unless you want to completely isolate yourself, it's becoming a more and more corrupt system, which of course is the whole point of cryptocurrency in the first place, is decentralized finance. Yeah. So, not to go, I know we wanted to talk Milei, but, we've also seen a lot of stuff happening in the crypto space lately. Roger Ver, Samurai, Changpeng Zhao, also known as CZ. I mean, it's not been a good time for the cryptocurrency space lately.
No, it's been, especially on crypto. I think specifically, there's been a consolidated effort in the last couple of months, or maybe it's just all coming to fruition right now because of the ETFs, to really crack down on as many off-ramps, privacy-enabling features that are decentralized as possible. And yeah, we've seen that with all these, Samurai, Roger Ver, et cetera. They're really cracking down on everything. And in Samurai's case, it's really ridiculous in terms of the indictments. Is basically they're seeing it as a money transmitting system, but for that you need custody of the funds, and Samurai never had custody of those funds, and also didn't make money off it. So it was completely decentralized in that sense. So they can't be seen as a money transmitter unless they're going to, change that definition. But it's very clear. It happened earlier with Tornado Cash, where the founder was arrested in the Netherlands, and they clearly want to get rid of anything that is remotely more private than just the public ledger of Bitcoin. So you can see the same thing with delisting Monero. It's been delisted on most big exchanges. Only Kraken still lists it. But even Binance delisted Monero. Binance worldwide, not just Binance US. It's crazy. And Kraken, I think in June or July, they're going to delist Monero as well. So that really gives you an idea that Monero works because they're really trying to get rid of it. Of course, it's also used for a bunch of illicit purposes, but at the same time, so is anything else, like a computer or a phone or what have you. It's just like a tool, which is nice to have, and it doesn't mean that everybody who uses it is a criminal. So it's interesting. I'm really thinking about maybe just keeping a little stash on a decentralized wallet that I control, just in case it's ever needed in a full-blown CBDC dystopia environment. Not so much out of a store of value perspective, but more of like, digital cash if you really need it.
Yes, this is not financial advice. This is not legal advice. This is not tax advice.
No.
This is not immigration advice. Also, regarding Tornado Cash, I always tell people it's important that we put names on these cases, and that guy's name is Roman Sterlingoff. So we want to put a human. We want to humanize these cases, and that's why it's important to use a name. But anyway,
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Getting back to Milei, though, what are the things too? Is we've seen some. It sounds like, are the export tariffs still there, or are those going to go away sometime soon?
Yeah, those got to go away. I'm actually preparing an article about that because it's a little bit more complicated than people realize. Where the export tariffs, well, first of all, anything tax related, so tariffs fall under that, has to go through the Senate as well. So Milei can't just issue an executive order and take those tariffs off. That's the first thing. The second thing is, look, a lot of politicians are deeply tied to those tariffs and have interest there, with different organisms that, all take a chunk out of that. So, a positive vote there is not very likely if a project gets filed. And then the third thing is that in the Mercosur, which is basically the trade union, the full members, which are Argentina, Brazil, Uruguay, and Paraguay, those are basically the founding members. There's a lot more members that are partial members, like Chile, et cetera, basically the whole of South America by now. But the full members, they also have certain tariffs that they have to put out on products that come in outside of the Mercosur, basically to protect their, sort of protectionism between Mercosur countries. That's why, electronics in Brazil, Uruguay, and Argentina are super expensive. In Paraguay, it's almost the same as U.S. pricing, but the only reason that's the case is because they just don't give a shit. They have a lot of contraband. They do smuggling, etc. And a lot of the products that you buy in stores actually came into the country like semi-illegally, and everybody's in on it. Nobody cares. But on paper, they shouldn't be able to do that as a founding member of the Mercosur. But that's a very interesting case. So it's basically piracy reigns in Paraguay, but that's the only exception to the rule. But Argentina is a lot more official in that sense that they can't run their economy that way. It's also a much bigger economy. So if anything, being part of that trade union holds Argentina back in definitely in getting free trade deals on its own with other countries, but also in terms of tariffs on imports that are non-Mercosur, which is like the vast majority of electronics, of course, doesn't come from the Mercosur. They have to import that. Cheap clothing, same thing. So there's just a bunch of things that are super overpriced in Mercosur countries. And I don't see that really changing for the foreseeable future unless they decide on a block-wide change there. And this is, besides all the additional tariffs that they have nationally, because Brazil, for example, also tax on even more import tariffs, and so does Argentina. So those they can take off, but then there's still a base that will be there even after that.
Yeah, that's very interesting. They're really, and maybe if Argentina, becomes more prosperous, you might see more industry moving down there, more of that type of industry. I mean, Milei came up a while ago and he met with Elon Musk to talk about various things. Maybe Tesla wants to come down there. What do you think about that? I mean, the prospect of Milei and Musk.
Yeah, I thought that was a super interesting meeting. Just because of Musk giving Milei more visibility, and I'm not sure if anything practical came out of that meeting. But for Tesla, I don't think Tesla cars, etc., would be suitable for Argentina just because of purchasing power. And there's no EV infrastructure at all. And if there were, then it's very likely that all those cables would be stolen very soon. I mean, I've seen some charging stations, but it's really one charging station every couple hundred miles or something. So it's there's no infrastructure yet for that kind of vehicle. I think from a Tesla perspective, what would be interesting is if this omnibus goes through the Senate and it becomes easier to fire people without all the legal implications. Because right now, if you fire somebody It's just like a hellhole of, getting sued, and the employee's always right. What the omnibus bill changes is the amount of time it takes for somebody to become a permanent employee, which gives them much more rights in case they're fired. So right now, universally across Argentina, no matter what company size, it's 3 months. So if you have somebody that is on trial for 3 months, after 3 months, they become a permanent employee, no matter what. And, that what has happened in the past, and, still happens, is, a lot of people work and they still do the best they can after 3 months. But there's also, a percentage of people that just start slacking after 3 months, waits to get fired, gets fired, get all the benefits, and they sue the employer, get more benefits, and then they go up to the next job. And the difference with Brazil is that in Brazil, there's a national registry where you can check if people do this. So, I have some clients in Brazil that, they told me if I always check when somebody applies for a job, I always check if they have a history of court cases against their former employers. And if they do, I don't even call them for the interview, just to be safe. And here that doesn't exist. So, it can always happen. And stuff like that can really, close to bankrupt your company. It can be a complete disaster, especially if you want to do everything on the books. This is also one of the reasons why 50% of people, are not even full employees, like on paper, and they just get hired in black and receive their salary off the books to avoid, these kind of things. And then, of course, they still sue, and they get an even bigger compensation because they were hired illegally, et cetera. So it's all kind of a mess. So what the omnibus bill tries to do is it creates 3 tiers for a small, mid-sized to big companies, and it changes the trial periods for until somebody becomes a permanent employee, which is for small companies, it's it's 1 year. For mid-size, it's I think it was 8 months, and then for really big companies, it's 6 months. So I think in the case of Tesla, it would probably be 6 months, and then that's a good enough time for a big company to sort of decide if they want to keep somebody permanently or not. And in terms of production, I think for Tesla, not so much the cars would be interesting, but having a battery factory in Jujuy or Salta, close to the salt mines, the lithium mines, that would probably make the most sense. Close to the source, and have Argentina export those. And of course, for that, you need to do all sorts of stuff before that becomes interesting. Like export tariffs need to go down. There's just a bunch of stuff that would make somebody like Musk think twice about investing in Argentina. Until all that is taken off, I don't think there will be very big investments until that changes.
That's one thing Musk could do, though, is he'd not necessarily maybe build cars, but maybe put in a battery factory or something like that, and and make batteries for other things, not just Teslas. I mean, and that's the problem with anything. If you make it hard to fire people, you're really just going to create a situation where people are going to be much more reluctant to hire somebody in the first place.
Exactly. I really think that the U.S. system is one of the better systems, because Europe is sort of trending in the Argentina direction, where it becomes really hard to fire people. And what you just see is like people are starting to get reluctant to hire people, and it should be super easy. And the easier it is, the more jobs are available. That's just the way it is,
And that's something too. I don't know. That's something I don't know exactly how you do it, but obviously, in a lot of cases, employers in America will do a criminal background check, but I don't know if they and some will do a credit report. But I don't know if they do, lawsuit background checks, because obviously you don't want to hire anybody who has a past of suing employers. It's that's just a ticking time bomb.
I don't know if is it that prevalent in the U.S. to sue your former employer when they fire you.
Well, I would say in the USA it's more common to be something like sexual harassment or something like that.
Ah, okay, yeah.
I don't know of that many of what I would call wrongful termination suits. It's
Got it.
I don't know. I may know one or two people personally have tried to pursue this, but it doesn't really work. But certainly the case, sexual harassment, they made a hostile work environment. They didn't give me the proper accommodations, accommodating disabilities, and
yeah, it's sort of like they throw it on one of those minority angles in DEI kind of things. That seems to work best lately in the U.S.
Possibly racial discrimination or something like that. I don't really hear, and sad but true. There are people who are, there certainly are people who do get unjustly fired.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, definitely in some cases, it's it's totally understandable that somebody would file a lawsuit.
Yeah, I mean, mostly too, you hear about, I certainly have people who had people in the acting business that certainly have had their lawsuits and they have their unions, and unfortunately, the acting biz, unfortunately, is always a business that's going to be an employer's market because there's so many people who work in it and there just aren't that many jobs. So,
yeah. Oh yeah, one thing about the Tesla, and I forgot, like in the omnibus, one of the articles is about big foreign investments, and actually they created an incentive system where they pay less taxes overall, et cetera. So it could be like if that is filed and passes through the Senate, then it can suddenly become a lot more interesting for really big foreign investments to start investing in Argentina because they have all those benefits.
I get that, but that's also one thing that always I think that fuels the socialists, and I think they're right. When you give tax cuts to certain people but don't give them to others, you're not a capitalist. You're engaging in crony capitalism, or just as Gene Epstein just calls it, crapitalism. That's all. That stuff like that is always such a public relations disaster for free marketers. I hope it just says we're going to create a good climate, so you want to come down here, but it won't shock me if they do end up at least.
Yeah, well, we'll see in probably within 3 weeks. I think this will go through the Senate, and because they have to do it before the 25th of May, because that's the date of the national holiday that Milei wants to sign the May Pact with the governors for a more prosperous country, etc. And he wants to have the omnibus law approved in the Senate before that. So it has to be in the week before.
What's the national holiday on May 25th?
So it's basically the constituting of the republic. It's not Independence Day. That's the July the 9th. But this is basically the founding fathers coming together and declaring that Argentina is a country.
Yeah, Argentina it wasn't always a country. It's I know they called it the Viceroy of the Rio de la Plata or something like that, I believe, right?
Yeah, exactly. When it was a Spanish province, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, or the word often was a viceroyalty, or viceroy was the person who ran the viceroyalty. Anything else we want to cover? There's certainly been some any other cuts or regulations you think that are worth mentioning right now?
Well, privatizations probably, those are also included, except for YPF, which is the national oil company, or partially national oil company. And that one is interesting because right now they're entangled in this lawsuit where they have to pay $16 billion basically for nationalizing 51% of the company and without shareholder approval. And it looks like, of course, Argentina can't pay that. The judge in the U.S. already, approved that fine for doing that, and now they're starting to press on embargoing Argentine assets abroad, or basically give us the 20 or 51% of the state-owned shares in YPF, and we'll cancel part of the debt with a part of the fine with that, and then there's still fine left to pay because it's not even enough. So yeah, we'll see what happens with that. That is a potential, a sort of Damocles hanging over Argentina's head. So we'll see what happens with that. I wouldn't be surprised if it would be a way for Milei to basically get rid of YPF. Say like, yeah, look, it's been such a shit show in terms of this whole nationalization. Because the company, I would actually, not like to see that, because I do think it's a strategic asset. That company, particularly, there's a bunch of public companies that can be very easily privatized, and no issue at all. But YPF, since it's oil and gas, it's been running at profits, etc. I do think it would be strategically interesting to maintain that, partially those state shares, and just improving the management, etc. of the company and the production. So because I'm not sure what would happen if they would hand that over to Burford Capital and what they would do with it. The interests there are definitely not aligned. I think, in terms of the future of that company. So yeah, we'll see what happens with that. So I hope they can keep those shares and pay it some other way, or come to an agreement. But yeah, that is something that we'll read more about in the upcoming months.
Yeah, hopefully this privatization works. Is it there seems to be two types of privatization. One is when the government just sells off something to whoever comes and bids on it, and then the other case, which seems to be the better one, is when every citizen gets one share and then they can sell their shares. How do you think this privatization will happen?
Well, I think that the latter will definitely not happen. I think it will be similar to what they did in the '90s, where they privatized a bunch of stuff, and I just hope they get a bit of a better deal, because at that time, they really got pennies on the dollar for those companies, and there was a lot of. It was similar to what happened in Russia, where, a lot of friends of friends got in at ridiculously low prices, and they made a shit ton of money. I just hope that dynamic doesn't repeat, because, that is always a danger with, privatizing stuff here in Latin America, that you sort of get those backdoor deals in, and, somebody gets a kickback and everybody benefits, that is in the political layer. So I hope that dynamic doesn't repeat. Of course, you can't really say if it will or won't, but that said, there are some companies that it doesn't even matter if they do them away for pennies on the dollar, because they're just such a drag on the economy. So. In some cases, that's definitely true. But in others, like YPF, I would think twice. Also, even the postal services, I would that's still worth something. So it would be nice to get a max out of that before just giving it away for practically nothing.
Well, yeah, I think that's going to happen if you don't do it the other way. You just.
Yeah. I think
every citizen gets one share, and then obviously if somebody wants to go buy up all their shares, they can do it. But yeah, it's it doesn't have to happen, but that seems to be the way. You just end up somebody, the government decides to privatize 50 cars, and somebody comes in and buys those 50 cars for $1,000 each, and the cars are worth $10,000. I've seen it happen way too much. It's there's supposed to be public auctions, but there's always somehow somebody games the system and works it out. There was also, something else too. Some people jumped on. There was that transgender funding bill that some people talked about. It wasn't worth discussing because it was something where he was basically paying off an order that had already been placed by the previous government, right?
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things that all those critics didn't understand was that the previous government made those hormones part of the mandatory standard Medicare, basically, for everybody. So that has to be included. So even if Milei wants it or not, he would have to change the law first to exclude that again, which he probably will in the future. But until that time, it's part of the official package that everybody has access to. And it was so funny because a lot of Americans were bitching about it as if it were like $800 million. It was just like it was I think $800,000 or something.
Because pesos.
Pesos.
Yeah, and the peso does appear to have pretty much been stable for the last 3 months against some of the bigger currencies I've looked at.
Yeah, I'm kind of pissed about that I didn't jump on the peso interest bandwagon because having 50% on a stable peso would have way outpaced the dollar in these last 3 months. But yeah, who could have known?
Yes. And speaking of the transgender issue, we had an issue up here in not too far from where I grew up at girls at Lincoln Middle School refused to compete in a shot put against a person who was born a male. So they went into the ring and then they just all stepped out and said, no, we're not doing this.
Wow.
Maybe 12 or 13 years old. I was really glad to see that happen. I don't know how this stuff's going, but I don't know if the situation's gotten quite as crazy down there, but it's went nuts up here.
No, I think it's still not as crazy as in the States.
What was that? Milei also gave that speech a while ago to the various governors of the provinces. What can you tell me about that? He was, basically outlining a vision for the country.
So that's the whole May Pact. Basically, that the idea is to sign that on the 25th of May, and it was the opening of the of Congress, and officially because before Congress was actually working throughout the summer holidays, but that was like an emergency situation to try to get the first draft of the omnibus bill passed, and everybody was very upset about that, like from the opposition, because they didn't get to have holidays. But the speech Milei gave was for the official opening of the normal cycle, and there he basically came up with those 10 points that he wants to sign on the 25th of May, which is basically respecting private property, being more aligned in terms of economy, and incentivizing foreign investment. Yeah, that is the May Pact. I wrote my latest article is about that and about the omnibus bill. So the first part of the omnibus bill is already passed. Now we're waiting for the second part, and then the 25th they're going to sign that May Pact. And it's very likely that all this goes through now because in the Senate, that is more tied to the governors directly. And the governors, they want this to go through because basically it will also bring back their income taxes, which they do not have right now. And they're very much reliant on discretionary transfers from, the federal part, which they're not getting because Milei basically, took those out completely. So, unless they agree, it's sort of, kind of an extortion in a way. If you guys don't sign this, you won't be getting the income tax part.
Yeah. I will say we've tried to be positive, but I will say I'm a little disappointed to learn that Milei is apparently not going to fly on the commercial jet or airlines anymore like he was.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was great that he did that for so long, but I can also understand that, especially with his stance on Israel, et cetera, it's going to become more of a liability if he does. Because it would be very easy to get to him. Just anybody could just book a flight and sit right next to him, basically.
Well, I like to say that flying private is more for kings than for presidents, but it's it'll be and look like anybody. I will admit, I live here in Austin, which is where Tesla was, and I actually went down to the airport trying to see, well, hey, maybe I can see Milei at the airport. So yeah. Hola, señor presidente. And of course, he could probably walk down the street in America, and most people would not know who he is.
No.
Yeah, I mean, most, but yeah, it's I don't know if there's anything else we want to you think's worth mentioning here. I want to tell people where you are before we got to go here. So yeah, it's you're bow-tied Mara, and you got your business, and you basically consult people who want to move abroad.
Yeah, want to move abroad or want to invest in real estate here in Argentina. So yeah, that's they can book a consultation on my website, or sign up for the blog. It's free to read, and basically I write about Argentina mostly, and sometimes about other countries, but mainly about Argentina.
Yeah, I also want to, I'm not getting paid to mention this, but there's a Cato Institute event in Buenos Aires on June 11th and 12th. They're going to have Milei there, but also Deanna Mondino, Emilio Ocampo. So that's another. Axel Kaiser is going to be there, and some one Nobel Prize winning economist, and Lawrence White, and a few other people. It's a very good lineup, and I'm tempted to come down there myself. And he's also going to be speaking at Freedom Fest up here in the USA. And Joanne Skousen told me they're actually going to have a security team with them, because we're still talking. It's 10 hours from Buenos Aires to most airports in the USA. It's a long haul. So yeah. But anyway, thank you, Bow-Tied Mara. We can find you at Bow-Tied Mara, or you're on Twitter at Bow-Tied Mara.
Yeah, on Twitter, Bow-Tied Mara, and bowtiedmara.io is my blog, and .com is my personal website if you want to book a consultation.
By the way, do you have other Twitter accounts? Because I see all these other bow-tied accounts up here that seem to echo similar themes. Or if you don't want to say that, that's fine too.
No, it's actually it's kind of a community where it started with Bow-Tied Bull. That's like the originator, and basically it's anonymous cartoon characters who all have a specific trait that they either it can sell or create products around, etc. And the idea is just to create a Wi-Fi business, or Wi-Fi money, online income. From that, so yeah, that's where it started from. So I'm part of that community.
That's an interesting community. Well, okay, I'm Chris Baker. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, check out my Substack. I have a novel called Escaping the Village. This is now the 44th edition of the Javier Milei Show. So also, and check out the other shows in the playlist, including Bow-Tied's earlier show. And I'm Chris Baker, and we're out.